For a more immersive experience, I recommend using headphones. I've never been a fan of Halloween, to be honest. I can't stand a holiday. The whole masquerade with its awful costumes, cheap scares, and the strange smiles on drunk faces. If friends invited me to celebrate, I always found an excuse to bail. But this year, everything was different. Lately, my life had been defined by depression and self-pity. A month ago, the love of my life left me. You know what they say, time heals all wounds. Well, so far, I wasn't seeing any signs of recovery. When I got the call inviting me to a party, I resisted for a long time.
Sasha, how long are you going to mope around at home? Halloween is a great excuse to have some fun,
my classmates insisted, and while I was in no mood for a party, maybe they were right. Having a couple of cocktails with friends was way better than sinking deeper into the swamp of depression. The party was at Lena's place, the most popular girl in our department. She could turn any evening into an unforgettable event. They said this time she even rented an old abandoned dacha outside the city to add to the atmosphere. The place had long been famous for rumors of mysterious things happening within its walls. You couldn't ask for a better spot for a Halloween party. I decided I would go. I needed to get some fresh air and clear my head. Besides, no one was stopping me from leaving the moment I wanted to. My costume, though, was a last-minute choice. I had hoped to get by without one, but that wasn't an option. Lena had warned everyone in advance. If you show up without a costume, I'm kicking you out. It was a joke, of course, but I didn't want to piss off the party's host. At the nearest store, I managed to find a cheap clown mask and an old dark shirt. It looked ridiculous and pathetic, but I didn't care. I just hoped this stupid party would help me, even for a moment, to stop thinking about the turmoil in my soul. It was already getting dark when I went outside. In October, the dark evenings always arrive so unexpectedly, so suddenly. The wind was cold but light, and the leaves rustled quietly under my feet. I got on the 101 bus. It was supposed to take me right to my destination. It was a long ride to the dacha communities, and I dozed off along the way. I was awakened by the driver's sharp voice. "We're here! End of the line!" I rubbed my eyes and looked around. The darkness outside the window merged with the dilapidated dacha houses, through which the light of street lamps barely broke. We had pulled up to the gates of an old dacha cooperative. In the headlights, I could see a crooked metal sign that read Risvet. "I need to get to the last stop, to Ozernia," I said, trying to hide the irritation in my voice. The driver looked at me as if I'd said something completely unimaginable. "I'm not going there. It's too late. We don't drive there after dark. Haven't you heard the stories about that place?" "I've heard them," I muttered, automatically gathering my things. "You guys really believe that?" But something in his gaze made me shut up. I gave him a conciliatory smile. "Come on, man. I'll pay you extra." "No, kid." The driver shook his head again. "I took you as far as Rasvet. You're on your own from here. Nobody drives there at night." I sighed and headed for the exit. It was pointless to argue. As soon as I was outside, the driver floored it and drove away. I had at least another half hour to walk. There wasn't a soul around, only the rustling of trees, the darkness, and the wind, which seemed to whisper something in my ear. And in the gloom, strange silhouettes flickered. So, at this time of night, drivers really did refuse to go deep into the Rasvet cooperative. There were some dark rumors about this place. They say something strange and inexplicable happened here every year. Personally, I had heard 3 stories that were passed around, gradually embellished with new details, But the gist was always the same. Once, a young family, a father, mother, and 2 children, bought a small house on the edge of the community, right by the forest where I was heading. They had only lived in the house for a few weeks when, suddenly, the neighbors noticed the house was empty. There were no signs they were planning to leave. Their things were still in place, food in the refrigerator, the dog tied up in the yard. The neighbors waited a couple of days and then called the police. The house was searched, but nothing was found. No signs of a break-in or a struggle. In the end, nothing was officially figured out. The case was closed. But those who knew the family were sure that something, not of this world, had taken them.
A couple of years after the family disappeared, 2 local teenagers decided to test their courage. They had heard the story that in the house on the edge of the community there was a basement that no one had entered since the family vanished. Intrigued, they grabbed flashlights and climbed inside. One of them came back, early in the morning, covered in dirt, with wide eyes and completely white hair. The boy wouldn't answer any questions, just shook his head and howled. They say he was put in a mental hospital and still hasn't said a single word. The second boy was never found. And then, a few years ago, the cooperative's management hired a night watchman, Petrovich, to keep order and scare off curious onlookers. Petrovich was a man with nerves of steel who had seen a lot in his life. He would wander through the empty lots at night with a flashlight and a dog, always laughing at the local rumors. "Those are just fairy tales for the faint of heart," he loved to repeat. But one day, at the end of October, right around Halloween, he disappeared. The night before, he was seen patrolling the territory and closing the gates, but in the morning, his guardhouse was empty. All they found was his dog, which sat at the entrance of the shack, howling all night long. When they tried to calm it down, it bolted towards the old abandoned house by the forest. Petrovich was nowhere to be found. The next day, the dog was also found dead in the bushes near that same dacha. Its eyes were wide open, as if it had died of terror. All of Petrovich's things were in place. His flashlight was neatly on the table. His walkie-talkie was working. But he had seemingly vanished. The guardhouse was later locked up. But if you believe the legends, at night, you can hear strange rustling sounds. A dog's howl, human screams, and an inhuman laugh coming from inside. I wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or any supernatural things. All of it seemed like nothing more than stories for tourists or school children. But remembering these stories, I shivered inwardly and picked up my pace. As I approached the dacha, I saw the dark silhouette of the house against the sky. Lena and her friends, judging by the sounds, had already started having fun. Dim light filtered through the old window frames, creating a creepy feeling, as if the place itself no longer belonged to the living. Suddenly, right at the doorstep, I noticed something strange. A dark figure was hunched over, tearing something apart with a sickening, wet sound. A quiet growl reached my ears, and I instinctively stopped. The moon broke through the trees, illuminating only part of the silhouette. And what I saw made me freeze. This creature was smeared in dirt. No, not dirt. In something dark, resembling blood. Its claws glinted in the moonlight. Its thick hair was matted, and its head twitched strangely in time with its chewing. The creature was tearing something to pieces with a disgusting, slurping sound. My heart started pounding faster. All those stupid stories about disappearing people flashed through my mind. For a moment, it seemed like they weren't fiction at all. And then, like an idiot, I took a step back, accidentally stepping on a branch. The crack of the branch snapped the creature out of its trance. It jerked its head up, and for a moment, I saw an elongated snout with eyes that flashed in the darkness.
"What are you looking at, bro?" A voice came from the darkness, and the creature suddenly stood up on two legs. A werewolf costume. The guy wearing a huge furry mask took it off with a smug grin. In his hand was a bottle of beer, from which he took a noisy swig. "Sasha, is that you? You finally came. We were really waiting for you," said Victor, my classmate whom I hadn't recognized at first. "Man, you look awful," he suddenly roared with laughter. "You got scared, didn't you?" I exhaled and squeezed my eyes shut, mentally cursing my own paranoia. "You should see yourself," Victor continued to laugh. "Relax. I won't eat you." "Very funny," I muttered, still feeling the fear raging inside me. "Come on, it's Halloween." I forced a smile at Victor and went into the house. I needed a drink. Fast. My nerves were shot. "I'm imagining things," I thought, and pushed open the door to the old house.
"Sasha!" Lena shouted, rushing to meet me in her extravagant witch costume. She had on a wide-brimmed hat, a long black dress, and matching black lipstick. "Finally! Come on in. Everyone's already here." I smiled shyly at her and awkwardly pecked her on the cheek. I always had a crush on Lena, and I wasn't the only one. Everyone was crazy about her. She was beautiful, charming, with a great sense of humor. In short, a cool girl. Smiling widely, Lena led me inside. The house was just as I had imagined it, old with a gloomy atmosphere. But everyone else seemed to like it. They were laughing, having fun, and drinking. Someone in a vampire costume was hugging a girl with furry ears. A couple of familiar guys raised their bottles in greeting. There was fake cobweb hanging everywhere. Although I'm sure it wasn't necessary. The old house was already crawling with spiders and dust. The dim light from old lamps illuminated the room, and the air was thick with the smell of booze and cheap snacks. A party, just in the atmosphere of an old abandoned dacha. "Here, have a drink." Lena bounced in front of me, shoving a plastic cup into my hands. "You clearly need to relax." I nodded and took the first sip. It was some kind of cocktail with cheap rum and something hard to identify. It tasted pretty bad, but I didn't care. The party was in full swing. Faces in grotesque masks flickered all around me. Sharp laughter cut through the air, and the shadows outside the window seemed to be growing darker. The music was blasting at full volume. My temples throbbed. My head was spinning. I tried my best to relax, but it wasn't working out so well. I'm here to have fun, right? Right. So, let's have fun. Trying to cheer myself up, I even made a few awkward dance moves. But when I caught a disdainful look from a girl in a Snow White costume, I immediately stopped short. Snow White was laughing and pointing at me, telling something to a mummy standing next to her. I noticed that several pairs of eyes were now staring at me, burning holes through me. I felt unbearably ashamed. I tried to disappear into the crowd as quickly as possible. Why the hell did I even come here? I hate this damn Halloween. Looking around, I noticed that, unlike me, The guests had gone all out. A nun in a black and white habit was talking to a she-devil whose twisted horns reached for the ceiling. A plague doctor was smoking a cigarette right through his mask, swallowing the cigarette whole, with smoke coming out of the huge black eye sockets. Everywhere I looked, there were demons, grim reapers, skeletons. I knew it was a costume party, but the figures looked sinister. Even the fake blood, for some reason, looked terrifyingly real. "Vampire's kiss," I heard a whisper in my ear. I spun around and saw a ghoul smirking at me, bearing sharp, long fangs. "What? I don't understand," I stammered. "Vampire's kiss," the ghoul repeated. "Want to try it?" For a second, I was genuinely scared, but then I realized with relief that the guy was just offering me a cocktail. I nodded, and he poured me something from his mysterious bottle with no labels or writing. I took a couple of sips. The cocktail had an unpleasantly tart taste. Something strange was floating in the crimson liquid, some kind of small flakes or bubbles, but the guy just chuckled, seeing my confusion. "Don't worry, it's a homemade recipe. But man, does it hit you." He winked and disappeared back into the crowd. I clutched the cup, deciding to drink slowly. My head was starting to split. I couldn't tell if it was the booze, the flashing lights, or something else. The party continued to gain momentum. The noise gradually turned into a gruesome roar. Instead of music, I heard a grinding sound that pressed on my ears and echoed in my head. The guests' voices began to sound like a cacophony. I tried to make out the words, but all I heard was a vague whisper. The shadows on the walls began to writhe. I suddenly realized that their movements didn't match what was happening in the room. The shadows were moving to the rhythm of some other unheard music. Strange. Must be a really strong cocktail. I'm imagining things. But that was only the beginning. Very quickly, I noticed that not just the shadows, but the faces around me were beginning to change. One guy with long hair, with whom I had just exchanged a few words, suddenly bared his teeth in an unnatural grin. In a dark corner, someone laughed quietly, a hoarse, almost whistling sound. Several figures stood motionless, staring into space, their faces seeming to melt, their eyes looking like they were about to pop out of their sockets. With every movement, it felt like the room was changing shape, as if the walls were breathing and objects were swaying back and forth. I thought I was losing my mind. I wanted to go home. Suddenly, Lena, the host of the party, appeared in front of me. "What's wrong, Sasha? Don't leave so early. We have so much fun ahead of us." Her voice sounded off, somehow. It seemed to have gotten deeper, or maybe I was just imagining it. She poured some cocktail into my cup. I was about to protest, as I thought I hadn't finished the previous one, but the cup was empty. That vampire guy poured it for me just 15 minutes ago. What the hell? I thought maybe I just needed to get some fresh air. I decided to go outside to clear my head a bit. But when I stepped out onto the porch, instead of fresh air, I smelled the stench of rot. The nausea intensified sharply. Strangely, it was completely silent outside the door. The loud music didn't reach here. How is that possible? Not a sound. Only the dark silhouettes of the trees swaying slowly in the wind. I tilted my head back and looked at the sky.
There were no stars, and the moon was hidden behind the clouds.
Returning to the house, I was immediately hit by a wave of heat. The air inside was boiling. The guests apparently had lost all connection to reality. They were laughing, screaming, and spinning in a chaotic dance. It no longer resembled a harmless party. It seemed that everyone present was gradually going insane, or already had. In the center of the room, Lena stood on a table, waving her arms and shouting something in an unknown language. On her face was not just a smile, it was a bestial grin, the same as the ones I had glimpsed in the crowd. Her eyes burned with an unnatural light. It was a terrifying, truly terrifying sight. I stepped back and suddenly bumped into someone. Turning around, I saw the familiar Snow White. Her skin was strangely pale, almost blue, like a corpse. Her mouth slowly opened, as if she were about to say something, but instead of words, a rasping, tearing sound came from her throat. I tried to pull away, but her hand gripped my shoulder with surprising strength. "Stay, Sasha." Her voice was low and distorted. I jerked my shoulder, pushed her away, and stumbled back. Other figures flickered in the crowd, the ones I had seen before, but now their faces, hands, and bodies were elongating into inhuman forms. The shadows on the walls began to converge towards the center of the room, where Lena continued her diabolical dance. She was laughing, shouting something insane. Her body began to stretch, her spine bending at an unnatural angle, her head lolling to the side. For a moment, it seemed she was no longer human. Suddenly, she froze. Her eyes locked onto me. I felt a cold sweat run down my spine. "Sasha, you don't want to leave, do you?" she uttered. But the voice came not from her mouth, but as if from underground. "The fun is just beginning." I couldn't take it anymore. In terror, I lurched back, knocking over a table, and bolted for the exit. My heart was pounding like crazy. I felt that if I didn't leave now, something horrible would happen. Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm, and I screamed. "What's wrong with you?" Lena sharply pulled her hand back. "Sasha, it's okay. It's just me. Don't scream like that." I stopped and looked around. Normal, cheerful music. The faces had become normal again. Just slightly drunk students dancing. Everything was back to normal. "What was that?" I whispered, feeling my legs turn to jelly. "Did you drink too much or something?" Lena laughed. "And when did you even have time? You've only been here for half an hour." Half an hour? It felt like an eternity. I must have really overdone it. A normal party, normal people. It was just something wrong with my head. I felt a burning shame wash over me. I must have looked like a complete idiot. "Lena, I'm sorry. It's all the stress. I should probably go home." "No way am I letting you go in this state. Have you seen yourself in the mirror? You're as pale as a ghost. Come on, let's go upstairs." It was noticeably quieter upstairs. The room with the sloped walls looked cozy. A bed, faded posters, wooden floors. Only the window was boarded up, but that was understandable. It was an abandoned house, rented out only for parties like this. "Feeling better?" Lena looked at me intently. "Yeah, thanks." I don't know what came over me. Stress, I guess. "You know, I just broke up with my girlfriend." "I understand. It must be tough for you right now." "Yeah." It was nice to just sit like this and feel understood, listened to. It felt like it had been forever since I'd experienced that.
I was used to going through everything alone. Lena, without breaking eye contact, sat down next to me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders as if to comfort me. Her fingers were ice cold. "Everything's okay, Sasha." Her voice, soft and almost melodic, now sounded sharp. "Don't worry, I'm here. You're safe."
Something's wrong. The thought flashed in my mind. I tried to pull away, but Lena's hands suddenly clamped onto my shoulders like steel vices. Her grip tightened with each passing second. I couldn't move a muscle. Fear surged into my consciousness, but my body wouldn't obey. Lena's face was so close, I could feel her breath on my skin, cold and smelling of decay. "Lena, what are you doing?" My voice broke into a whisper. Panic seized my chest. My heart was beating wildly. I had to call for someone. There were tons of people downstairs. I just had to scream louder. Lena smiled as if she had heard my thoughts. But there was nothing human left in that smile. Her lips stretched far too wide, revealing two sharp, long fangs that gleamed in the dim light of the lamp. "You know, Sasha," her voice seemed to echo from the depths, "you're not here by chance. You're the main event." "Our dessert." Her hands squeezed even tighter. I felt claws dig into my shoulders, under my skin. I tried to scream, but only a pathetic croak escaped. Suddenly, shadows emerged from the gloom of the room. The other party guests, my classmates, moved slowly toward us. Their faces were twisted into inhuman grimaces. The skin stretched tight over their skulls, turning them into hideous monsters. They approached slowly, with relish, like hunters playing with their prey. Each of them was smiling, showing off their sharp, long fangs. "Please, don't," the words stuck in my throat, my breath caught with terror. But Lena just laughed. It was a low, deep laugh, like the rumble of distant thunder. Her lips moved closer to my neck, and I felt the tips of her fangs touch my skin. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body wouldn't obey. Her fangs slowly sank into my flesh, and the world exploded in pain. The other vampires were close now, their faces contorted with hunger, drawn to me like a source of life. One of them, whose skin was gray and withered, sank his teeth into my arm, another into my leg. They tore at my flesh like predators, making sounds that made my blood run cold. "We haven't tasted anything this delicious in a long time, Sasha," Lena whispered, pausing her meal for a moment to look me in the eyes again. "You're making this an unforgettable evening." The fangs and claws digging into my body felt like they were draining not just my blood, but my very soul. I could feel my strength ebbing with every moment, the light around me dimming. My thoughts became jumbled, and the pain gradually gave way to emptiness. I was no longer afraid. Only one thought pulsed in my head. This is the end. The darkness began to close in, slowly and inevitably. The last thing I heard, before everything plunged into an endless blackness, was Lena's sinister laughter. I woke up in the dark, crushed by something dense and moist. Earth. I recognized it instantly. I felt its taste on my tongue. My hands wouldn't obey, and my body felt alien, dried out, as if all the juices had been squeezed out of me. I tried to breathe, but my lungs filled with dirt. Panic washed over me in a wave, and I began to struggle, clawing at the earth with my gnarled fingers. Dirt filled my mouth and nose, grinding on my teeth, but I kept digging, breaking my nails, driven by something unfamiliar. It wasn't a thought, not fear. It was instinct. Finally, my fingers broke through the top layer of earth. My head emerged, followed by my shoulders and arms. I crawled out like a fish thrown from its grave, gasped for air, and immediately started coughing, spitting out clumps of dirt. My hands were shaking from the strain. My body trembled, but I forced myself to get to my feet. I looked myself over. My hands were abnormally thin, my skin as dry as paper. Caked blood covered my entire body. I had become my own shadow, a ghost. I don't know what strength kept me on my feet. I looked around. Crosses everywhere, wet earth, graves overgrown with moss. The night was endlessly dead, like the cemetery itself. The trees loomed black on the horizon. The wind whispered something in the leaves. A faint, barely perceptible light broke through the tree branches. Someone was there, alive, warm. I heard a heartbeat. It was beating faintly and slowly, but with its rhythm, another feeling grew within me, something deep, dark, filling me from the inside. And in that moment, I understood what it was. Hunger, an all-consuming animalistic hunger.